You know, you would hope in America that we all like come together. We all just like we have recommendations by our government that our states interpret, and then either choose to say or okay, or we're going to take and pick and choose what we have, and here's our new rule. So it's a beautiful thing, really, because every state gets to do their thing. And hallelujah.
Hello, everyone. We'll see if we get on. We're a little bit late today. I'm sure our reminder popped on and off, but welcome for all of you that are on and for joining later. If you do come on, like, follow, subscribe, share. I'm really excited about this interview, John. I'm stoked to have you on and kind of share your knowledge. But I'll let you kind of introduce yourself right now. Give us some highlights about where you're at in the industry and so forth. But
yeah. Well, hi, everybody. My name is John Porterfield, and work here in Montana and helping to really promote the hemp industry in all forms, really. I've been impressed with some of the investments that we've seen in certain areas, and now it's exciting to kind of see it evolve into new areas. For me, it was a lot like part of Montana's history, where we had the two richest men in the world living in Butte, Montana. And mostly they were mining silver, and then eventually they went after copper. And the silver was up in the top layers, and the copper was in the lower layers. And so I look at the plant the same way. We've kind of got the silvery, shiny buds on the top, the flowers that everybody was really excited about, the CBD. I call it the extraction distraction. But the real value is down in the bottom. You got to dig a little deeper. And so in that fibrous portion and the stalks is the hurd, you know. And so we have two other big valuable parts of this whole plant. Really, if you take it to like maybe 4 levels, you can take the seed, the flower, the fiber, and the hurd. And so maybe even the roots too, because we know just about every part of the plant has got some sort of benefit. We don't want to just basically neglect it.
So how long have you been in this industry, John? I feel like I know John really well, and John and I have spoken. I've actually been up to his area and looked at his property. So I've been lucky enough to get to know you, but nobody else really knows a lot about you. So give us a background a little bit, your time frame in the industry.
Well, I've been a part of a fertilizer business in Montana, and so that really kind of led to the promotion of our fertilizer. And so it would take me into the cannabis industry, because they realized that if they didn't add silicon to their soil mixtures or into their aeroponic or hydroponic systems, their plants were really weak. They would fall over, it could blow over. And so here's a really good chance. They just basically beat a path to our door coming out of California and Oregon and Washington and Colorado. And so once the cannabis, that whole kind of medical side got it, and they got wind that we not only had the only natural source, all these others were synthetic liquids. Ours was a natural source that happened right here in Montana. So I helped start that line, helped create that company. It's called Ignimbrite, and it's under the trade name Montana Grow. So most of the people in the cannabis world know that Montana Grow makes this big effect. And cannabis is such an unusual plant because it actually can continually improve its nutrient density. So lettuce would go up to a certain point and then taper off and just basically level out. But cannabis now, so if you're able to feed it and continually give it good nutrients, it's able to build nutrient density all the way up through the whole thing. And so when it comes to the fibers part of the plant, the fibrous part is a redeposition of silicon. So it's just basically transferring the silicon that's in the soil up into these veins that are transferring nutrients up and down the plant. It has an upward and downward mobile function in the plant. And so getting the quality of the fiber, getting the quality of the hurd, getting the quality of the seeds and the quality of the fiber, it affected all of it. And it affected the root development too. So it was really about the message of, hey, we're out here with a natural fertilizer that would just grow the heck out of your plant. So the National Cannabis Industry Association have spoken to these conferences and been a part of just that whole industry, a big sponsor of it, and you throw enough money at it and you get even more attention. So, but that's been the fun part, is really kind of being a part of that side of the industry. I miss, getting the whole industry together. And I've watched this transfer of people out of the medical marijuana industry into hemp, right? There were less legal battles, less red tape and rigmarole. And so they've made their way into it. And I think to a certain degree, it's been kind of a buyer beware sort of audience, as we've seen, but it's now that the players have kind of come in to kind of clean things up and hopefully, take the industry forward. But it's really been, I think it's been exciting to see how different people are growing it, how different varieties are now out there in the marketplace. Really some of the challenges that are coming on, it immediately hits everybody right in the face. We can all grow hemp. It was because the fascination, is it going to grow on my property? Is it going to grow in my soils? How's it going to do? How am I going to feed it? It's like a bunch of men looking at new babies. They didn't know how to handle it. What do I do with this? Oh my gosh. And it's such a baby. And the seeds are really sensitive to being, mistreated and break and crack. And then you're just, so you really, and there's super expensive seeds and there's super, super, super cheap seeds. And so I like to focus on the super, super cheap seeds, really, and with a function to the highest value of the crop, because the farmer they don't have money to be dumping into this sort of stuff. We saw some amazing investments going into people's land and get burned. I just know of nobody. I honestly like to share names of people that had good contracts and fulfilled all the way through like they expected, because a lot of the companies just weren't worth the paper they had contracted with. So the idea of contracting is super important to me, to be able to offer fair contracts to farmers. We've kind of agreed on that we've got to beat alfalfa. Alfalfa's value is somewhere between $750, $800 a ton. We got to get to about 900 as a good, fair number to make sure that we can have a fiber grown specifically for fiber industries. We tend to just think that if any and all hemp plants become like perfect for fiber, and it's going to be in a pair of jeans in a couple of days, we can just like stitch right from the field right into jeans. And there's so many other parts of the process that are in the way that some of them still have to be built. So I'm privileged to be involved in the early stages here, where we actually have some of the machinery that helps create the fiber and create both in wool and in hemp. And so we've kind of seen that the wool industry's got this amazing ability to have a resurgence because of a new commodity coming on board, because the machinery can be duplicated and be used in ways that, as you've seen, this is old machinery we're dealing with back from 1863. So newer machinery will come on board. And that's the exciting part, is that this new phase is going to be investment in these second and third stage processing of decortication, of proper separation of the herd, and the herd is a pretty tricky subject, when it comes to a certain number of uses. You can go to certain uses and probably be really moldy, crappy hemp, this is from old bales. And then other times it's got to be so sensitive and kept off the field so that there's no contamination that's going on in that herd and no contamination in the fiber. And so that's where I lean towards, is away from cutting and laying it in the field for any amount of time. We basically want to clean cut it and then bring it directly into a trailer and then be able to dry that fiber. And at the same time, we're treating the herd the same way as we're treating the fiber to keep it from getting contaminated. And this is a big factor that's going to affect a whole bunch of different parts of the industry. It affects the seeds, of course, and it affects the flower hugely, but it really still goes all the way through. So we want to see organic practices. This has been kind of my big preaching model here, is that Montana has 27 million acres of farmland, certified farmland, over 27 million acres. You just think about that. We grow about 5.5 million acres of wheat. And we have the finest wheat in the world here. And the reason we know that is because our state has set up a laboratory to test all of our grain. So all of our other grains, kimmer and oats, everything else goes through our state grain lab. And in that process, we can guarantee to buyers and to the farmer too, that we know exactly what they have, but also what it's worth. And the buyers can be guaranteed that they're not going to have other contaminants. So the same sort of thing plays into being, it led to why General Mills started setting up mills across Montana and then making these massive investments in our grain system, because we had the ability to, as a state, to really guarantee that. And so we also have a fiber lab here in Montana. And so I feel very privileged that we have that so close that we can do research on different fiber diameters and know exactly what we're making so that we can guarantee it to our buyer and get the best return for our farmer that's done a good job of growing our seeds and growing it the way we need to, having a soil test and making sure they're not, deficient in any or need some amendments, and then taking it all the way through the system where they harvest it properly and keep it off the ground. We dry it, they get another payment. So somewhere around $900, probably split into $300 increments at planting, at harvest, and then again, maybe 45 days later. So people, and that 50 million some acres will transfer into bringing hemp into as a rotational crop. I've said it's going to outpace wheat. And so the goal would be to try to get out there where we're really into the millions of acres. And so it's going to require a lot of seed. Over the course of time, I'm sure we're going to grow into that sort of scene in Montana. It'll be used as a rotational crop to control weeds. And I think this is the biggest opportunity is that I found a report that was done back in Chinook, Montana, that was 1914 when we had a military base in Chinook. And the soldiers were growing hemp out here. And they grew it for 5 years. And the reason they grew it is to try to find an option here for the Northern Plains where they could control Canada thistle. And we love Canadians, but we hate their thistle. And field bindweed. Well, these are the two biggest nemesis in farming. And so, and there's others too, but those were biggies. And so they found that they had to get to at least 9 feet height, 9 foot height, and a seed density of like 30 pounds per acre. And they could totally just block out all the weeds. So we've seen this now. We've got living examples now that we can grow hemp again. We have organic farms here that are growing hemp that have been in a no-till situation, which allows a little bit of undergrowth to still live in there, but not after you get hemp planted on there. And the hemp, now at 9 or 12 feet tall, there's nothing growing down on the ground. There's no weeds, and the weeds have just been completely choked out. And certainly after 1 year, if you haven't done it by the second year, they're done. And that is the big factor, because we see Roundup of all the stupidest things. We get Roundup in all of our systems now. It's coming from the rain, we believe. I think it's even the organic crops have got some level of contamination, so it's something that needs to go away. But it's contaminating hemp too, to a certain degree. I don't know what the long-term ramifications will be, but it's it's important to continue to go towards organic. We only have about maybe 500,000 acres in Montana. They're out of that 50 million. So we got a long way to go. We're only at about 1%. We end up creating about a 5% impact, 5 or 6% impact in the organic market. And it's kind of crazy because at first I didn't think that the fiber industry would really care about organic hemp, that fiber that's organic, but it turns out that's exactly what the mills want. They want organic hemp fiber. So there's a conversion here.
That's driven by our consumers, right? The consumers are asking for that. They want to know where it's made, that it's sustainable, what it's doing to our earth, right? That it's labeled as it is stated. Yeah.
I think everybody, all the way through that whole supply chain, when you come back to the supply chain, it's actually bad for the farmer, because it's actually really expensive for them to get these chemicals if they did go to the chemical side. The non-organic side is taking on more expenses than they probably need to. That's the point, is now they've got a tool to control the weeds that they otherwise would have used some herbicide on. Get away from the herbicides, use hemp would be the biggest thing. You could live better. But you go through this supply chain, and now you've got the other costs that comes through it, and you have to be able to protect it in a way so that the farmer can still get paid a good amount of money, but the processor and the next one in line, it has a realistic chance of actually transferring and adding more value to it, and then someone else adding more value to it from there. So we're at a challenging point here, because the cost is not as easy for the farm to absorb. And this has been a big factor, is that just a lot of money has been going into just the growing portion of it, the cost of the seed. So we have to find cheaper ways really for farms to implement hemp easier all the way through their systems, even in the non-organic, but certainly on the organic side. The organic people should wake up and go, yes, we have a market for our fiber. And in most cases, we're trying to grow. I would hope that we can grow to a point where we can actually grow the plant up tall enough to be able to harvest the seeds off the top, so we have organic food, right? If we're going to eat parts of the hemp plant, we want it to be organic, I think, all the way through and through, even if it's going to be extracted and all that side. I know that the guys in the extraction world say, no, it doesn't matter if there were chemicals used. But I'm saying, let's start with the way we originated farming back when we all started as organic farmers. We're going to finish as organic farmers. But they really have to wake up and see that there's a good opportunity to in some cases, even integrating sheep onto the property as another tool to control weeds, but also to grow organic wool, because organic wool is important to the industry too. So here we have a couple 100,000 sheep running around Montana and create a lot of wool. And the wool growers need to be able to change over as soon as possible, really, is what the industry is saying. There's been some reluctancy, even though almost all the operations are actually operating at kind of an organic level. They just haven't gone through the added step of becoming certified. But that's where we're going. In the fiber industry, we're going towards organic. And people just need to know that and have the assurity that whether you're putting clothing on troops, you're putting clothing on your children's back, that this stuff came from an organic source. And so the ability for this industry to trace its fibers that are coming into it is not only super important, it is the way of the world now. And so you got big retailers like Walmart, right, that order just tons and tons and tons and tons of clothes. You're thinking, wow, I'm not really selling to Walmart, but their supply chain has really, really tight controls all the way through it that we can all learn lessons from. That there's no doubt we know where products have been made and coming from. Now, whether everybody has legitimacy wherever those foreign sources are, it's much harder to tell. But as we rebuild the textile industry in the United States, we need straight up people, straight up honest people ready to do regular business and know that there's probably thinner margins right at this start, and that there's going to be some figuring out. We're figuring out still how to make the machinery so that it makes the best fiber. We're still figuring out how to make the best herd. We basically know these systems exist, so they're simple enough to just kind of rebuild. And the key is to not just be taken by it and having like some special machine that's just out of control, expensive. It really doesn't produce the finished product that we want. We've seen some of that in the industry too. So it'll be good to see, I think, the second and third tier processing companies really kind of move into it. And that's where I see our role in Wool and Hemp. Wool and Hemp is able to bring what the wool growers and what the hemp growers have and be able to bring it into one more added value. And in our case, we're making high-end pillows and duvets that are hand sewn in Montana. It's really beautiful stuff. And all the filling is right here. And then other things where we can make insulation. And there's a long list of other things too, beyond just providing fiber out into the spinners of the world that are going to integrate our Montana fibers into their fabrics. Right.
So you said a few things that I want to back up. We talked about the different types of plant. You mentioned, this, how it's grown, how it's harvested. Can you kind of break down what that ideal phase looks like for the textile type fiber versus a cannabinoid or high resin plant?
Well, I think the rule of thumb is that the plant can't be laid onto the field. Field drying is probably not appropriate for just about anything that I'm thinking of in this industry at this time, honestly. And it's sad to see like really high-end, beautiful, expensive seeds that grow as the CBD Christmas tree, and they cut it and lay it on the ground for days, and so that's wrong too. So I really think that the care and the standards are, just super important. But the process is really, the best I've seen is a clear cut tool. And I don't have any stock in ag solutions, but they have a clear cut tool that's got a conveyor belt off the back of it. And as it swath cuts low, it takes out the whole fiber crop. The problem that we get into, we talk a little bit about, most of the focus has been on the female plant and whether or not you've got any male seeds in there. People out walking fields, pulling males. Hey, there's another one, get them out of there. People growing in greenhouses. Oh, get those males out of there. So we cull the males quickly. So, and for me, the fiber industry, the difference is that the females are the problem. No offense, girls, but the female plant has branches on it, and branches leave nubs on fiber, and that's not favorable because we measure things that are, super important. We have these what's called the average fiber diameter, and so when you look at this really closely, the fibers, the male fiber is the best, cleanest, smoothest fiber, which is what builds the best profile. And when we do these tests, we get these really cool things. They're like charts and graphs that are called histograms that show what the level of quality of your fiber is from a core sample. And so we do this for the wool. We do the same thing for the hemp. And being able to really study and see what it's doing, you can see that the younger plant, the male plant, is the softest fiber. And what I know from my friends over in China is that actually when it's about 6% THC, it's about the softest. So the male plant of the 6% THC. So that's why I helped to sponsor a bill in Montana 2 legislative sessions ago to move that arbitrary 0.3% THC to 6%. Still really bad marijuana, but it's the softest fiber hemp. And I guess if you're just going to grow
full grown, at that point, then can you grow it to full term, or do you still harvest it?
You harvest it early. You're harvesting
Still.
right at flower, right as it. So you got some females, and right as they start to flower, the males have already blasted their pollen sac, and so they're free of the pollen sac, but the females haven't produced a full seed yet. And so this is a little bit of the problem. If you don't get to take that value as a separate cut, you've lost out a little bit. So the value of that fiber is that it's soft and it decorticates real easily. It also cuts real easily. So in my field of dreams, there's almost no female plants seen. We go through and cull out the females. So that you just have this, and it's called thimble. And I don't talk to many people that even understand what thimble is. I say thimble, and they're like, what are you talking about? And thimble is the male plant. And thimble is super important to this industry, growing it, harvesting it. And, you know, for the dioecious seeds that are out there, these male and female varieties that are grown typically for the food, for the seeds, or they say they're dual crops and they're going to be a fiber herd seed, you know, product, is that they are, you know, that there's actually going to be a dual use. And there's, in most cases, I don't see that there is going to be able to be a dual use for them, but the seeds won't be active. They won't be viable. And so when they take the whole field out and dry it at that point and keep it off the ground, that's really what the fiber industry needs. And it would be literally as it comes into the truck, as the conveyor belt's delivering it in, you could pull females out of there, because when we go for the average fiber diameter, we have to keep the quality level up. And so that's where the industry in the spinning world has really been sorely upset that the hemp industry hasn't been able to provide the right kind of fiber. And so when we get a whole bunch of Christmas trees, and you've seen this shucking process, they shuck all the flower off these Christmas tree hemp plants, and then they've got mounds that are huge and high, and they save them all over the place. And I think that's going to be going into fibers, into jeans, you know, that's going to be into the fabric industry. And that's what's been supplied to the spinners of the world, is just a really, really crappy looking fiber. And so that's where we know now that there are ways to get it down to below the industry benchmark, which is 30 microns. So you could do things like this. You could rub it against the inside of your wrist to see how your fiber, and if it reddens your wrist, it's too coarse. And so as you get, not to say it's not valuable, you could still go into ropes. It could be into mats or insulation, all kinds of different things, but it won't go into fabric. It won't be spun. And so at least it's spun to be on something you would wear. And right. So those are the big factors, I think, is that we start to really get better and better about growing it properly, treating it properly in the field. And I can't underestimate that enough. I mean, most operations have not even considered really that the field drying would be even a problem, first off, or that like chopping it up in the field and then sucking it up later would be a problem. So we really have to get away from that type of thinking. The fabric industry, this whole upper end of the fiber industry, has got to really carefully look at that. But I would hope that we'd start to see that all the way through all of the systems, where we don't let field contaminants really be an issue. And then kind of go from there. You know, it's got an exciting future for sure, but just to be able to have all the other thousands of uses to go on, we don't want to have contaminated product from the very get-go and transfer it all the way through the industry, because it'll cause additional problems for anything from building trades to other people. And I know there's ways to wash it, there's ways to like denude it of any kind of problems, but it usually takes another step, and adding one more step is another cost. Just picking it up and moving it over here is $15, you know, in a forklift. So there's a lot of cost.
It's less competitive. We're not going to last, right? Long term, as this is a commodity, you know, when we're sitting at the front of the commodity industry for this is the fewer steps, the better. Our price margins are going down.
Yeah, no question about it. I think that's where people try to be vertically integrated. That's one of the thinkings, is that if I'm already making this, then I should be making this, and I should make this. But in reality, you can blow the budgets. We've seen certain companies go out where they've just gone and said, we're going to do it all. You can't believe how vertically integrated we are. We're not going to make any products, but we're going to be vertically integrated. And so the key is to make products that the industry needs and wants. Food has been the easiest. The seeds have been great. Toasted seeds, they have hearts, they're so popular. And even the meal that comes from that, you get a high protein powder, that comes from the meal of those seeds. And so on we go further down the plant. Again, we're out of the silver zone. Now we're moving into copper, and the copper is what powered America. And I think the fiber, like my friend Kent Masterson Brown, I'm a sponsor in a film. I hope anybody else out in the hemp industry jumps in and sponsors this film too. It's the history of hemp in America. And I think it started really as the history of hemp in Kentucky. But Kent Masterson Brown's a master storyteller and produces shows for PBS. He's had a lot of success in educating American youth. Pieces and parts of this will be given out as special segments, but the overall story is the feature-length film. So Kent Masterson Brown's a part of all this whole thing. And I think as he's seen it too, he's seeing the old technology being re-emerged. That because we wanted to go back and find out how in the world were these guys doing this? How were these giant cordage companies being built? I've seen Cleveland Cordage, this massive building, and they made ropes, different size twine, and then twine into bigger sizes, and eventually just giant size ropes for ships. And of course, those businesses are long gone. But how do they do it? We find these pieces and parts, and so I think that's going to come out in the story, about really how some of these companies did it. But that's where a lot of the research needs to happen, is to basically coming back with it. I think we're seeing new technologies in ways that I didn't really think that fiber could be created. So we're seeing some of that sort of thing too, where it kind of degums it all in the process of decorting the whole thing at one time. So who knows, in 5 years, 10 years from now, where we're going to be, how much of the old technology we're going to continue to embrace, and how much, we've maybe just interlaced it. Really, we're integrating really old technology. And even from the guys back in the military base, I was saying, earlier at Chinook, they harvested that hemp and they used that hemp. They were able to decord that hemp, much like they grew flax, and they still grow flax across Montana. Flax is an excellent fiber too, really super, super strong. And it has a wonderful seed too. So, but it only grows to about, 40 inches high. So here's hemp that can grow, 3 or 4 times that high. And so it's pretty interesting to see. I hope we are able to have farmers taken care of. This is kind of the biggest thing, is that farms a lot of them have gotten burned, and a lot of them are still interested in growing, but they won't grow without a contract. So now it's a matter of supporting companies that can process hemp. And much like when we first started growing grain, the grain producers realized we need another mill, let's put an elevator in our town. And suddenly the town sprung up because they had an elevator. And then later, as things evolve, companies decide they don't need that elevator anymore, and the town just dies. It's crazy. And we've got to get out of that pattern in some way, so that hemp can be just a consistently used crop as a rotational crop for non-organic and organic farmers. And then to give them a reasonable price for it that's better than alfalfa. And then they'll start to really integrate it in. That nobody's going to get super rich out of that, but it's better than growing alfalfa. And it's better, actually, because they're going to control their weeds. And so they can just rotate it in where they need to, as they need to, as often as they need to. I'd like to see our state get away from the $800 fee to grow hemp, especially if you're just going to grow hemp to be plowed under. If you're going to grow it like a green manure crop to just build the soil content, over the course of a year. If you're going to just grow it for fiber, why in the world would you have to, spend a lot of money for the lowest, typically the lowest portion, the lowest value of the crop is going to be down here in the stock, but it's got the best chance to actually continue to pay farmers. And so if they can get a little bit from the seed, great. Yeah.
It can go into so many more markets, right? It can be used. And when we're talking, textile grade fiber is the highest grade or the highest quality, right? And so fiber then can be sold into 20,000 other products, right?
Lots of different things. And I think we'll learn more about how to grade those. I think that's the big thing, is like grading and having a standard system. We know when we looked at ASTM, there is no D37 language right now. It's just that's why I'm helping to write it. But that's really super important, is that we have the right language that allows us to be second stage processors and actually meet the guidelines of what we know, what I know anyway, about what the spinning industry needs for usable fiber. And so once we can do that and then consistently supply it to them, and honestly using a third-party testing facility, preferably through the state of Montana. So our state fiber lab is going to be rebuilt. They've got millions of dollars to rebuild this, the wool lab as it's called now, but it's going to have a multi-function because we've been using it for hemp fiber too. So it truly will be an exciting thing to have the newest facility with the newest technology, using the laser scan technology and also using optic fiber diameter analysis. And those are really important, just because we got to be able to provide the quality control. And more than anything, the farmer would love to say, look, I grew a fiber crop. Look here, it's worth this much. It's worth a lot. No, we can test it. And we'll tell them that, I'm sorry, it's covered in mold actually. And it's the wrong diameter anyway. It does have a use. It's probably over here in some sort of hempcrete where it can be, ground up, and the lime deactivates the mold or issues. I don't know. Maybe there's some ways that it can still be used. I haven't gotten into all those issues just yet. I've supported a lot of construction research over the years at the World Center for Concrete Technology in Alpena, Michigan. Super exciting to see what can happen. But I think the feedstock has to be pure. It has to be absolutely pure coming into it. So, these are the key things that we have to control in the industry, that's going to be quality controlled so that the consumer can have the confidence. And in the case of every single industry, that the second and third tier of processor has the confidence that this product has been prepared properly. Whether you're going to just all kinds of different uses, right? But it's really falls on the first responsibility of the farmer to grow it properly and harvest it properly. And then that's our feedstock. And so I think we've got a great future. It's really been, we went in like a big wow. We went clear up to 50,000, 55,000 acres, in our third year of growing here in Montana. And then we dropped way back down to 12 or 13,000 acres. So there was a big reality check when nobody got fulfilled on their contracts in 2019. Very few people got fulfilled on contracts in 2018. Certainly not all the way to the finish line. So a lot of farms that have been burnt out of this crop. It's not good. And so literally they end up burning their product, putting all their time and effort and dedicating all the land into it and just having to burn the bales.
What do you see the future being for them? And I want to talk about, like, back to the female male real quick. Yeah. That's a big discussion, especially as people are, growing fields or acres outside of the female plant. And now I'm growing a male, field next to it. Or, where does what type of zoning conversations and what does that look like for the future?
That's a really interesting discussion. You would hope in America that we all come together. We all just we have recommendations by our government that our states interpret, and then either choose to say or okay, or we're going to take and pick and choose what we have, and here's our new rules. So it's a beautiful thing, really, because every state gets to do their thing, and hallelujah. But it's really, really tough to then pick standards or pick the best practices from every single thing, because the states are all different. Montana switched to a commodity back in June of 2018, I think. So a lot of states, they are considering whether to even allow hemp to be grown, or if they've just recently allowed hemp to grow. There's really not been the discussion to kind of bring it in as a commodity. In Montana, it's a commodity. It's no different than growing wheat. Just grow oats or wheat, and you contract it the same way. So provide a contract to a farmer. If you provide the contract, you're supposed to be bonded back through the state. So it's just basically a fair way of just protecting the farm, again, because we've had too many people take advantage of our farmers. And so I think that's been the big step, is that just making the simple laws the same laws as what everybody else is already used to dealing with, which is mostly wheat. And so I think we set about, trying to follow USDA guidelines to the letter. And it was more to kind of protect people from just suddenly thinking, oh, medical marijuana is going to be found on every farm around here now. They're going to be hiding it in the fields. It was a lot of that sort of worry at first. People just didn't know exactly how people were going to treat the whole program. So I think that's why, because it's a service-based organization, the Department of Agriculture. So if they provide a service, they have to charge a fee for the service. So it kind of a mix and match. So to provide for a couple extra people to run around and do stuff and test, and it ends up costing close to $800 for your license. And so we've got to somehow hopefully this coming legislature, we're going to see some changes in our hemp law. Some of the commodity things are going to go away related to hemp fiber. And so I think that's going to be important, but it still remains to be seen. But every state is different. And so trying to find the exact standard of exactly how we can even exchange it. Idaho is going to be the last one to go, right? They're going to be kicking and screaming. And to get our product to the coast, if we want to export it, we got to go through Idaho, or we dip it up and around through BC and send it that way. We got to go south, we're going through Idaho down to Utah. Shoot. Then we have to go around out through Wyoming or something, so it adds complications to the entire network of how we move products around. And it could be as stupid as trying to send fiber to a mill in Washington State. It could be illegal to send hemp fiber. Any parts of the hemp plant, I think, are illegal. But, finding some way to get some national direction. Fortunately, we got the 2018 Farm Bill that really opened things up hugely for us. But there's still some tripping points for getting investors in. Banks, we have to have banks allowed to play in and understand, especially where the fiber industry is. I had to explain to my bank numerous times, that I have obliterated my hemp plants. They have been washed and there's nothing left of them. By the time they get stuffed and mixed with wool, there's just nothing left of it. And so there's no THC involved. But it took them a while to understand what that process was. I think,
John, Utah needs help. One of our members, they're having to test each roofing tile for THC.
Wow. See, these are the things that are just kind of taken wildly. It's like the COVID thing. Some places took it wildly crazy, and others are like, a little more lenient. And in the end, I don't think we have to do that level of testing at all. Especially when
it's like saying somebody's going to smoke the driveway.
Yeah, smoke your driveway or smoke your wall panel.
Yeah.
Or smoke your pillow, or smoke, what? Yeah. I know it's always just been kind of a running joke that can I smoke my shirt if it's made from hemp? So yeah, you could. People probably can, and they'll probably demonstrate that they can. But there's no effect from it, obviously. So those are the silly parts of this industry. They're like, come on, people, let's kind of get beyond that. But ultimately, the problem is deeply serious. If you can't bring the biggest banks in with confidence that they're going to operate in this space, maybe they're right. Maybe they're right to be very cautious of operating in this space. What's happened in the first couple of years has been enough to reason to be like, hey, we're happy we're not getting burned for the big, what our customers are getting burned for. We're thankful we didn't finance them to do that deal. I think is basically what the banks would say. They'd be like, good, we didn't get burned because these second and third tier processing companies didn't have any legs to them, and either didn't manage the fields properly so that they were grown for the right use and planted right and managed in that side. Because there's a lot of hand holding when farmers don't know exactly how to do it. They know how to put the seed in the ground, and they've got the right equipment, but without the right spacing and the right plan for what that's going to be doing. And there's all kinds of things that needed to happen that a lot of times the companies that contract with our farms here don't follow through with that side of it that was critical. And we've seen it. I can draw a lot of different examples, both growing for fiber and some growing for seeds and others growing for, of course, everybody that was growing for CBD. It was just a wreck. We had 2 years of train wrecks here in the CBD world. So, and so people are kind of picking up the pieces, kind of repurposing parts and pieces, and the whole extraction distraction though is starting to wane. I would call the extraction world is not the hot topic to discuss. Fiber really is, and herd is, and those are the bigger values of the plant, frankly.
Is CBD, like the female plant, high resin sativa, more labor intensive to harvest or to grow than the row crop of fiber?
Certainly,
Okay.
certainly. The processing is different, especially if you see how a lot of people will end up hanging those Christmas trees like garlic, with a lot of airflow. So you're using more energy to dry them that way. I think drying fiber, same sort of thing. You're going to use some energy to dry it properly. So maybe not a whole lot of difference there, but field treatment, certainly keeping it off the ground, same principles apply. Um, but you shouldn't go into the CBD side and expect that you're going to be providing fiber that's going to be in the garment industry. It's just not the right thing. So getting your head around the fact that there is value, there's going to be some value to that Christmas tree, little Charlie Brown tree, but it should just go to other things. It just should be milled up and used as just a solid mixture in boards there's a whole bunch of different things that are starting to come out that just use the entire stock. So you find those companies that want the whole stock and you start milling it up. Milling it probably is the best thing you can do, is because then you reduce the size by 70% or something. You take this mountain here and you actually collect it down into super sacks. So now it's usable to kind of move it around. That's kind of the best advice I have for those folks. And then moving it into somebody that you can have a consistent supply. Sometimes co-ops kind of form that role where you get, we've got enough now between us that there's actually enough to actually use to make it interesting for another processor to take it, whether they're a construction company or they're, any other long list of different companies that want this. But again, they're going to have the assurity that that it was properly handled, and it's not going to have mold in it, and it's not going to be just old bales that are, really full of mold. Ultimately, some companies are interested in the old bales. I've had companies that have just been like, no, our technology deals with any kind of mold issue. We encapsulate it. Fantastic. So I think we're just going to see more and more of that come out. But when it comes to fiber, we got fiber. We've got to make sure we really take good care of it and keep contaminants out of the entire system.
What areas, or if any, do you think there will be certain areas that are dominant in certain types of fiber that are grown, maybe some that are grown specific for textiles? And I bring this up, really because we talk about how far we can actually transport and this 100 or 150 mile radius. Are we going to see, say, Montana, Texas, North Carolina boom in textiles and the fiber for that specific process, and may see other areas for biofuels and plastics?
Well, it'll be probably in some ways we'll see some of that. I would hope that we would. I think certain issues have kind of faced the industry that, things that we've talked about on Global Hemp Association about the working conditions for some of the existing textile operations in America. They're nowhere near as clean as China. They're nowhere near environmentally sensitive as China. And we give a lot of blame on Chinese that they're not very sensitive, but they actually are when it comes to this. They're extremely sensitive, on environmental concerns with textiles and fibers. And we need to learn from those things. And we need to rebuild our own industry at the same time. But we have some wonderful spinners, weavers. We really just have to supply them. I think it's more of the cream of the crop of the fibers can go to our existing mills for quite a long time here. But it's something it could happen, and it probably should happen too. I think some companies know that they want to kind of go to more open spaces. So Montana's probably destined to get.
There's a reason China and India are so far ahead, right, in the textiles. Their technology, their processing, their whatever it is. I'm not super educated over there like you guys are, and we've had some incredible experts on our show. But why is it important, or why should people be paying attention to the textile industry in the U.S.? Because I see articles popping up about Florida and Montana and Texas and big public-private partnerships with this emphasis on military potential. And
I think it's when you look at the bottom line, it's it's in the trillions with the T word. It's in the trillions every year. So the industry knows that it's this big impact on the world economy, and so they look for ways to recycle their own materials. So we've seen this much like you see in the oil and gas, where like they got more efficient. We got to get more efficient because we may not be able to expand. Same sort of thing. I think the textile industry is looking at taking a close look at themselves, closing a much tighter look at the supply chain, calling out the bad players, and it's the bad players that are actually kind of move way up into the top too, as the industry's now revealing. So there's even tighter reason for even more tighter chain of custody from field to fabric. Means so much different, than it did 10, 20, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, certainly. We have better testing technology, first off, so we know what's going on. We have better ways of tagging fabric.
Can I back up just real quick?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware of this at all when we first started, right? I didn't realize, like, if I bought an organic shirt, like, I trusted it was organic cotton. I didn't put it together that there is a lack in ability to track and trace. If I go and buy, say, 50 pounds of organic cotton and I put it over here, and then I go buy 50 pounds of regular cotton that's not organic certified because it's less expensive, and I mix it together, and then I sell 50 pounds of organic cotton because I have my piece of paper, but I take it from my normal, and I put my piece of paper on top of it and I sell it.
Mm-hmm. But they look the same. And
how do you know, right? And so, yeah, that's where I think when we talk about this seed to cradle or seed to garment chain of command, that's the piece that is hitting the industry, and consumers younger than us are they care. They're being impacted by this so much more than we are, John, right?
Well, we've seen that the big industries can be big bullies.
Yeah.
And the big bullies kind of help to set the laws or kind of wash across the top of the laws, and it's not going to work anymore. It's kind of how the game is working. The testing is too sophisticated to test it, and the chain of custody that you have to prove all the way back through the system, certification and letters and things like that, not to add additional burden to the farmer, really. That's the key, is to not try to add too much there, but to add it to the next tier and to the next year, so that there's actually checkpoints all the way through the system. And so, yeah, that you're right, though. I mean, these are things that have been in the industry causing problems. Yeah, when you get an organic cotton T-shirt, there was questions about, really, where is this grown? Was it grown overseas under questionable organic programs, sold into the system, or somehow blended in? Yeah, there's all kinds of it. We just have to do our very, very best, I think, and just deal with honest people and honest companies that will appreciate that you've tracked it back to the field, and we can take that all the way up and around through the actual finished fabric. Mm-hmm. Every piece of it, all of the treatments, anything. And we're definitely there. The mills are calling for organic across the board. So I don't see any other destiny than to switch your farm to organic, get it into these programs, and start to provide what will probably amount to, tens of thousands of acres of hemp grown for fiber, harvested properly. And we should start in February in Texas and start moving up through Oklahoma and just follow it right up and start planting in April, early May around Montana, and just have the same variety. So having consistent seed is huge, because it's like making McDonald's French fries. The reason they're great fries anywhere you go is the same potatoes. And so they don't just switch potatoes, lightly,
And this is really important for those that don't understand the cannabis, the plant, that from one seed to the next, or even one zone, of your acre lot to the next, can affect your terpenes or your height of the plant, or so many things. And so I think
so many things, and it translates back to the soil at the farm where you're going to go use it. And some of the management and the amount of water you give it, or could you give it water? You're trying to grow it in dry land conditions with no irrigation, overhead irrigation versus drip line. There's all kinds of different ways that you're going to get different results. We know that genetics that grow in Canada can be taken to Haiti, and they're little short guys like this. And different things can happen. So you just can't expect that you're going to have the same height advantage at any given place. And there might be also a timing. The idea is that we can go to southern states and grow multiple crops. But in reality, after about the second crop, you're into like excessively hot seasons that just kind of limit you to maybe 2, maybe 3. But maybe there's ways you grow different ways that you get even more cropping out of the same systems. It's really interesting to see because every state has different rules and applications, but ultimately it comes down to, for me anyway, consistency, absolute consistency of the finished product, the same genetics, no tricks on the spinners, switching. Suddenly the average fiber diameter jumps above 30 microns. We can't have that, it's going to be coarse material and suddenly it's going to start to break their spinning machines. That's the whole thing. Building trust all the way through the system. Good, clean supply line that's well traceable from field to fabric or field to block or field to the side panel of your car or whatever you're making your hemp out of. It's an amazing number of things that are getting compressed and polymers. And so my phone rings off the hook with all kinds of different people in the industry that want to try to get to be a part of it. And so this is it. This is the exciting time. There's going to be an investment in a whole bunch of different technologies. And that's that entrepreneurial spirit that's really great. I just hope that everybody is finding a way to contract with the farm to get there, to really help the farmer win. As my friend Doug Fine says, the farmer's going to win with this crop, and it really should. And they haven't yet. This has kind of been the sad thing. So to get them back into growing hemp, the ones that got burned before, it's a big ask. It's really
big. So I've got a question then. When we talk supply chain, right, we talk a lot about what the big mills need in order to produce bulk volume of fabric or textiles. What does the decortication facilities need? Say we have, look at the auto industry, right? They're huge buyers, and there's no way right now the United States can supply their demand. But what if a region, right? How do we manage the consistency of the supply chain now that we understand, we've been able to put it together and make t-shirts or on small scale or uniforms on small scale. Now, how do we manage the supply long term as we have disasters, or if we have a machine go down or supply chain break where we can't get equipment pieces,
Well, there's much like the grain situation, the silo, the grain storage facility had to be centralized. And so there's some level of centralization. It's probably more than a couple hundred miles, from a farm to a location. We're used to like 45 or 50 miles just between neighbors in a lot of locations. So it's not uncommon to have to drive a few hundred miles. So in our case, we have enough wool and enough hemp grown within just 2 hours, let alone maybe another 2 hours further away that we could service. So we can take care of a pretty good area, but I would never think that I'm going to be bringing the raw goods from Colorado or Washington State over to my mill. I would bring this. I would only use like a local resource, and then making that resource into different size pieces of different parts can go to pretty long distances at that point. And then I think once it's processed, we can actually start to go to the rail lines. And this is where these lower value, higher volume things can really get, it's a quarter of the cost to go by rail. In most cases, it's about a 1/4 of the cost, but it's just not easy to actually pick off a rail line that you can do it. And sometimes if you have to switch companies, then you've got transfer fees and things like that. So, but ultimately, getting our product to, say, North Carolina or Georgia, where bigger mills exist, they've got the equipment, we have what they need. You find a way to put it on a truck and you send it off and get the bales off to them. So not the raw bales, the finished product after it's been washed and decorticated and done all the things that it's got to go through. Now it's a finished fiber that is spinnable. It's got a core sample that's been tested by the state to prove what it's got. It leaves on the truck. That's how it goes, and probably by truck for a long time here. We can't move bales of hemp on the rail lines. No bales on rails, as they say. I guess people like to set the trains on fire or something in the old days. But so those are going to be on the truck, right? They'll be trucked to the decortication place, or it'll be decorticated right in the field and separated. I don't typically like that idea because just there's more contaminants out on an open field than there are in a building where you've properly handled the material. It's just comes straight from the field right to your dryers, goes through the dryers, and then goes into your decortication. So that's the ideal scenario. Or you go put it in the right kind of storage facility so that it stays dry and out of the weather and out of the contaminants. And then you can prove that to the customer that they can walk the facility, they can see that that's the case. In the raw material side, it's super important because it's always going to be kind of somewhat of a troubled environment when you first are processing, because it's just all that raw material is going on. So from that stage onward, it's got to be clean. Got to have ways to clean, just like we clean seeds, just like we clean herd, just like we'll clean the fiber. Same sort of thing. So they don't want dust, right? Nobody in any parts wants dust, and they don't want contaminants of what they don't want, right? It's just whatever it's not supposed to be in there.
Well, and if you look at it on a business side, I don't want to pay by weight for something that I can't use, right? And what I've seen is a lot of this fiber that's being sent to these mills contains like chunks of herd and dust, and it's dirty and all different sizes. If you're buying by the pound and can only use 1/10 of your product, it's a waste of money and a waste of product. So,
yeah, a lot of that early stage processing is just that. I want the fiber, and I'm only going to get maybe 10% that's really good, the highest quality, maybe 20%. So somewhere in there. So all the rest of that plant is my herd and dust and powder and other microfiber stuff that's not going to be spinnable. So we really need to recognize that each of these different parts of the plant can have some value. And it's important if the farmer can get paid from kind of each part of the plant. If they're just going to be growing for one single purpose, that it's got a reasonable value. Like I'm saying, it should be around $900 an acre for them to commit to this. That would be my goal. And then beyond that, there's all different ways that people can end up growing this, and maybe even taking it on as just a plow down crop where they're just planting really ultra cheap seeds and just using it to block weeds and just plowing it under, and that we do that in organic systems where we're trying to build the nutrient content of the soil. So this would be another good way to do it.
So I have to give a shout out to our sponsor at Western Ag Works. They have a piece of equipment that actually moves through the field. I have a video that I'll start playing, but I'll share it with you, John. But it moves through the field, and it actually just strips the flour right off of those stalks and puts it off the field really quickly. They can do something like 19,000 pounds it's very fast. But then it allows the stalk to stay, and it's just being plowed under for nutrients back right in the soil, right? Yeah. But same thing, keeping it off the ground, way more efficient, makes it cost effective to actually harvest.
It's super important. Yeah, it's really good. And there might be ways to come back and swath cut that with a clear cut type tool and still drop the fibers onto it and not have them get contaminated with the field too. So those are going to be just the important things that we'll learn. Hopefully companies won't just base their whole business plan on drying in the field when they're actually really shouldn't do that. And it's going to cause the problems. And that's going to lead to some breakdowns in contracts, ultimately, and be like more headache. Dang, we needed to do this slightly differently. Even though we took basically what was considered best practices, it's still best practices sometimes are wrong practices for certain industries. So, and if certain states allow certain things, then that's a problem. We're talking about your question earlier is like distances between these crops. We didn't really get to the answer to that. States are doing things very differently. And for Montana, the rule is 75 feet. 75 feet. So if you have a sensitive crop to your neighbor, you're supposed to back off your planting by about 75 feet. I apologize to the attorneys if they think that that's different, but I think that's our rule. It's just a recommendation. It's not a steadfast rule, but you're kind of the unwritten laws. You're supposed to be sensitive by 75 feet. Well, shoot, that doesn't do anything when we know it can move across the Dead Sea, which is 75 miles, and it's pollinating plants. Yeah.
We talk about the bees. I mean, they fly from one to the other and no problem. But I think this goes to where when we say where is the industry going long term, maybe it will be those high resin plants are indoor grows. versus the outdoor commodity crop, or zoned, being zoned differently. But how do you stop it when bees are now being introduced as a very viable, they love hemp, they love cannabis.
They love hemp. I think it's beautiful. Montana's now like number two honey producer in the nation. We love it. We see the bees all over the hemp. I think that's really, really great news for all that side of it. I think Washington State has the most strict rules that you can't grow hemp within 5 miles of a medical marijuana operation. Okay, and so 5 miles is still not very far at all, first off. Secondly, who came first?
Right.
So when it comes to Montana, we know exactly where we grow hemp. It's on a list. You can look online and see everybody that grows hemp. And not exactly, they don't give you every detail, but you can pretty much pick it off. Where do we grow? Where are we growing medical marijuana? We don't know.
Right.
Nobody gets that list. No one gets that list. They don't share that list. So we don't know, as hemp farmers, we're completely innocent when it comes to it. Our own state did it too. They planted, we hadn't done any research at all. And at the last minute, a Canadian company gave us some dioecious seeds, and they put it in the ground just west of downtown Bozeman, and Bozeman has medical marijuana operations all around. And here the state's just putting out, just pollen that's probably just going all the way across the whole community, probably negatively impacted. A lot of times you might not even know where it came from. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, it is a certain risk. People that see that type of field and they know they're going to go back to a medical marijuana operation in the day or in the next couple of days, they take their clothes off. They make sure that so there's some sensitivity to that sort of thing. But ultimately, every state's got different rules and laws about how they're going to interpret it. And buyer or grower beware that you might have a neighbor that's going to be just growing for fiber with all male plants, and just big clouds of pollen are going to be coming off of that field. For sure. That's just how it works. It already happens now in most of the hemp fields.
Well, and understanding where the crop value is, right? It was really eye-opening to me when somebody said, they did I'll have to introduce him to you, John. His name is Joe. He did a study, I think last year, year before last, where he pulled how much CBD was being grown, or how much hemp was being grown for CBD compared to what would need to be consumed globally if everybody consumed every day. And Kentucky alone grew more than the globe needed, right, on the extraction side. And so it was just a really big, and then we saw this big dive in who grew because you couldn't process it, or it went hot, or so forth. And so really where opportunity is for our farmers, I see a small niche on the health and wellness or medical side, and a massive opportunity in the number of products that are much more diverse from the remaining side of the plant or everything else.
Yeah, and even those, I think, that go hot to a certain degree. Now we have Rand Paul's got legislation that's maybe going to take our federal level up to 1%, I think. So please. But even though sometimes crops go even just slightly above that too, I don't think any crop should ever be destroyed. You get a farmer that's risked everything to stick this in and just trying to make a supply and make a living for their family, and they have to go out and bulldoze it under, add more costs, pay for somebody to stand around and watch them as they dump gasoline on it and burn the thing. No, it should be like, okay, we're going to go to a different use now, sir. We're going to go into construction supplies, and maybe we've tagged your field as you can't sell it for extraction, but you still could use it for something else. Pelletize the thing and make fuel pellets. There's going to be a different use. Burning it is the worst possible scenario for a farm because they don't get a dime, and it costs them more money.
Well, and it
burns the farm. That's what irks me about any kind of rule like this that penalizes the farmer for trying to do something. If they were trying to grow, it'd be malicious.
Too much R&D. We said earlier, we don't know what seeds to grow where based on climate or type of fiber we're growing for. We know of, John, you and I talked about dozens of decorticating facilities or processing facilities that were like, they're missing the boat for textiles, or, they're right on for biofuels, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
How can we expect our farmers to put everything on the line and have no idea what they're planting or how to harvest it or what works, because there's no record of it in the past? And then penalize them with massive fines or potential jail time, or
I know.
I mean, really the loss of revenue is the least of what I've heard from farmers.
Yeah, no, it's a big black eye for sure, and you don't want to go there. But that's like, again, I think industry wide, the industry, maybe Global Hemp Association can help to drive that, is that don't be hard on the farmer. That there is another option, and all state laws should be modified to allow for hot crops to go to a special processing facility for one use, two uses, five uses, some other thing that it completely encapsulates the stuff and it doesn't make its way back into the other supply lines. Right. It seems reasonable. The crop can still be paid for, and it's, you know, you immediately drop to the lowest grade. And it happens on some of the best farms out here. One year they've got the highest falling numbers and beautiful protein levels, and the next year, because of some environmental conditions and something that happened, it just wasn't the same. It just, protein levels are down. They're not selling it to pasta. It's going to bread, or it's going, you know, to something else, you know, that's just super low value. And so there's no fault of theirs, but it really just, the environmental conditions throw a boomerang into the thing. And so we should always have another alternative. I'm going to try to press our own legislature to make sure that we don't do things like that really do finish the penalty. And if they're going to penalize somebody, it probably should be back to the seed company. The seed companies that provide the wrong kind of seeds, we got a lot of that over the last couple of years. People that thought they bought feminized seeds and they didn't buy anything other than probably just some cheap, you know, Canadian, you know, just, you know, I don't even know what they got. In some cases, it was just a terrible loss from getting the wrong genetics. And so proven genetics, I mean, our state's been a stickler about trying to make sure that they can track and figure out what genetics that they came from a legitimate source. But in some cases,
this goes back even more to the value of that track and trace, seed to cradle or seed to garment, right? It really is more than just the consumer knowing what they're buying. It really is security for contracts, to know what market it's going into, to know that you have these big, you know, buyers, say auto dealers or manufacturers or large spinning mills, that then know I have a supply chain because I know the seed works. I know the seed is what we need to be growing for the right crop. So
that's it. And it's enormously complicated. And my fertilizer business, we ship to overseas, and so we go to South Korea, and it's just incredibly complicated because now you're adding in, if you have any issues, you have to go and be able to extract it and bring it back if you want to try to retrieve it. Otherwise, you just abandon it and it probably gets sold dirt cheap or something, you know, whatever happens to it. But you've got to reassure the buyer. That's what this whole game is about, is to make sure that the buyers are going to be able to say, yes, and I do want this. And now can you increase it? And can you make even more? And then we're just going to need a few more farmers to come on board, and these legitimate companies that do want these supply chain portions of the plant. They've got the assurity of quality control, and they haven't had that a lot. And
I think
companies have seen it, you know, seen the woes of it, you know, bringing.
I think to secure the supply chain or that quality control, there has to be multiple mills and multiple places, you know, where this is happening, so that when it does go down, we I mean, they can't come on and secure their purchase from the United States if we don't have a backup plan, right? And I think that that's even a piece that, yes, we have it, right? And yes, we've proven the value, we've proven that it works, it's better for the farmers, we know we can get them for better cost, but can we scale and can we secure the scalability? And I think that's really
well, I think it comes back to other industries that are considering doing operations in America. It gives them either to move an operation from overseas to here, which means more American jobs, but also that there's going to be a factor of like basically trying to, you know, just ensure that there's more U.S. production. This is the idea, is that we're actually increasing U.S. jobs, and our own reliance is not on anything outside of the U.S. borders. That's the main thing. Is like, I think we heard it from Biden now, and I know we heard it from Trump. There's like, get away from, like, most of everything we buy tends to have had some sort of supply chain through China. And if we're subject to having trade problems or any kind of issues like we have with contamination, or, you know, just with COVID, you don't want to be reliant on things that are way far away. And everything from masks to everything that we wear, everything that we have, most everything that we can see, as you've said before, look around, almost everything around you could be made out of hemp. And it takes, as we know, a good, clean supply chain, a good strong investment in those technologies that can actually use that supply chain. So we've got a number of steps there. There's a number of existing technologies now that we're seeing, that both in the building trades and in, just other aspects of basically composites and things like that are coming into the construction trades. I think those are going to be the great things, the special composites where you can see the hemp plant, where you can actually see it and enjoy the long strands and the long fibers and these long pieces of the herd. I think that would be really fascinating. I'm seeing like a particle board that's made from hemp. And that's something, if it's gone hot, that's perfect for that sort of thing. Just crush it up, put a binder in with it and roll it out and make it into a fiber board. So those are the sort of things that I think the industry has to get a little bit creative. We need our states to be creative in the interest of protecting the farmer. And then, somehow getting the confidence to our banks so that the banks can provide financing for investment. And then that'll really help on a regional scale, where we have to go and do this regionally. We do have to do it regionally. That's how it will evolve, just because you can't transport this too far. So I don't know what the magic number is, but we can transport finished products a very long distance. We can export them overseas. We can expand our markets that are coming from U.S. hemp. And I think that's a really exciting thing, is that we've got the ability to. Canada loves hemp products, and they love organic products too. And so we should be selling more to Canada and selling more to Mexico. But I think ultimately taking care of our own people and our own farmers and building out our own supply chains for all kinds of different products, it's a big realization. When it came to food, it also comes right down to fiber too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're running out of time, but real quick, how do people get in touch with you if they want to reach out or have questions or want to get involved? How do people get in touch with you, John?
Phone number is 406-270-6797, and sales, SALES, at woolenhemp.com, WOOLENHEMP.com. And the website's woolenhemp.com. You can contact me through the website or just directly like that. So I look forward to working with more people across the world here. And it's great that you brought the global hemp scene to light here, and we've got a common voice here together. So thanks, Mandi. Oh,
yeah, thank you. I was going to say, what can we do as an association to better support the industry, and then you in particular? I mean, we work pretty close together, but where do you really see value from our association to support you moving forward?
Oh, I think the platform of communication is huge. The platform of standards and testing is huge. Actually giving a seal of approval for each state that the GHA has, approved that this is a good testing method, and kind of just through the whole system, the GHA has somewhat of a touch to from field to fabric, or field to block, or field to fuels to field to field to food. Any of those sort of things that I think that we have that we reach out to the partnerships of the existing agencies that are already involved in that, and kind of bring them into this overall discussion. It is a big discussion, and there's a lot to learn. We're helping companies save, enormous amounts of money, because they would have gone one route if they hadn't joined in with the Global Hemp Association. I know they would have taken a bath, and this way they actually find customers and they do things right.
Well, and I've been pretty stoked to be able to bring contracts together. I mean, with so much variety coming out, and so many people, not just from the hemp industry, but say USDA, or, when we've had big discussions with other spinners or designers, and being able to really see what is it that they need and are looking for, and being able to put pieces together.
It has been a global marketplace for most people's lives that are alive now. For our parents, it wasn't. It was just pretty singular, but it's a global marketplace, and so it deserves a Global Hemp Association. It really does deserve the bigger global voice, and I think that's really kind of this biggest thing, is that you've got that voice, and being able to bring the voice and the contracts together. it's much like a chamber of commerce, really. You're a global hemp chamber of commerce, and businesses want to be a part of a good chamber of commerce. And the chamber of commerce is always a great referral resource forever. You join once, you pay your membership, and you're just on your way forever. You can't say no to supporting organizations that are there to support you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thanks, John. I sure appreciate you. I'm so glad to have you. I sent paperwork over for anybody else. I don't know if you got it, the application for the next conference that we'll do.
Okay. Yeah, I think I did.
The World Ag Expo.
I already put in for it. I'm going to be, I signed up to be a speaker.
Okay, good.
Do a fireside chat. So.
Okay, good. Perfect. Other than that, you guys, if you need anything, reach out. I can help connect with John, but John's an incredible resource. Join our association, follow at Global Hemp Association, subscribe, and all of our YouTube videos are being uploaded onto podcasts. And so they'll be available there. Other than that, we'll see everybody on Monday.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Mandi.